Hey guys, welcome back. We're going to talk about first pressings, imports, blah, 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 how to tell kind of what you have in your collection, and then you can take it from there to see if it's worth anything, if you want to chase that rabbit or not, or just be happy to know like what kind of pressing you have, if it's import, domestic, so on and so forth. This is a question when people come in the store ask all the time when they bring in records to sell, but also when they're buying records. They always want to know, is this a first pressing? How do you tell if it's a first pressing? Well, believe it or not, time. That's a big thing. How long you've been around records and how much you know. Some of it just comes from working with records and being around them a long time. You start to learn what label a band is on, what the labels look like, whether or not that record was ever pressed in the United States, or if it was a European only or a Japanese only release. So some of that just comes with time. But there's a lot of people who are new to collecting, or who just got their parents' collection or brother's collection or whatever, and they want to know, and they don't know any better. They don't know what band is on what label and how the labels have changed, and all that rigmarole, old timer stuff or record nerd stuff. So I'm going to try to break it down for you real quick to help give you insight when you're out shopping for records or when you're going for records at home, to help answer those questions. Is it a first pressing? Is it an import? So on and so forth. First and foremost, when most people ask if it's a first pressing, they're not asking for Charlie XCX or, I don't know, Daft Punk or whatever. It's usually classic rock bands, classic jazz, stuff like that. An easy way to tell straight off the bat, if you're looking at anything from like the 50s on up through the 70s, late 70s, I should say, early 80s, and you want to know, is that Black Sabbath record a first pressing, or that Doors, or whatever you want to say, Alice Cooper. Hey, look, Alice Cooper. Is it a first pressing? Easy way to tell. On this Alice Cooper Killer, I believe it came out 72, 73. Not really sure. We'll check in a second. How do you tell? First and foremost, for these classic bands from the 70s and 60s, look on the back. Do you see a UPC code? If you see a UPC code, it is not a first pressing. It's a repress, or it's come out in the 80s or later. I believe the UPC codes, the little barcodes that are usually right here, came out late 70, could be 79, early 80s. There are some punk and new wave records that actually do have the little UPC, but it's rare because a lot of them don't. So but we're not talking about those, are we? We're talking about like classics. Is it a first pressing? Dead giveaway right there, kids. If you see a UPC on those classic rock bands and jazz records, it is not a first pressing. Now, like I mentioned earlier, if you're a record nerd and you've been around records a long time, another quick way to tell, or at least get you in the ballpark to know if you have a first pressing or a first run, however you want to say it, of the album, is the label itself. Let's talk about this Alice Cooper again. Alice Cooper, Black Sabbath, I don't know, Fleetwood Mac for a while. I don't know if that will apply. But let's just talk about Alice Cooper and Black Sabbath. For instance, on Warner Brothers records, easy way to tell if you have a first pressing is if you have a greenie. That's a very distinguishable thing on bands, like I said, Black Sabbath, any artist on early Warner Brothers stuff and classic rock. What is a greenie? It's the color of the label, as you can see here. These green labels, Black Sabbath records, like I said, Alice Cooper records, and the other artists, pretty good indicator you're got a first pressing or a very early pressing. I'll try to put up here on the screen what they look like as they went on. But for instance, Warner Brothers, these early ones are green, and later, as you can see, with Alice Cooper, I'll put an example here of Black Sabbath. You see the original Paranoid, green, and then you see what it looks like later in the mid-70s, kind of with that street and the trees and whatever. So that's a dead giveaway. If you know your labels and you can look at a label, like I said, those are Warner Brother labels. Look for greenies. Let's talk about Bowie. How do you tell if your Ziggy Stardust is an original? A quick way, label color again. Early on, RCA, when Ziggy Stardust first came out, was on the Dynaflex. These orange labels. This here is the first pressing Ziggy Stardust on these orange Dynaflex. Look at that crazy stuff on these Dynaflex records. I'll put a sample here so you can see the difference. They started orange a few years later, I believe in 75. They went to tan labels, and then in the late 70s, 77, moving on up, black RCA labels. So that's a dead giveaway if your Ziggy is a first pressing or not. Give you one more example, CBS Records. You want to know if it's an original pressing or not. CBS, or Columbia, I should say, changed the way their labels look over time. The original early jazz pressings and some of the rock stuff are these 6-eye labels. See these 3 on each side, these little eyeball TV looking eyeball things? Those are early 6-eyes. That's how you can start to tell, oh, is that Dylan an original? Does it have a 6-eye? Again, it depends on if you know when that Dylan release was released, or that album. But you move on down the road a couple years, and then you start to get something like this. Columbia, see how it's changed? No longer a 6-eye, but you have the 2-eye right there. And then as you get into the late 70s, I believe, early 80s, or maybe it was late 77, somewhere around there. We'll use this as an example. You can see how Columbia has changed once again. See how it just says Columbia all around the label there. So that's a dead giveaway, knowing your labels, what they look like, and when they changed. And also a lot, like I said, a lot of being able to determine if you have a first press or not. It's time, man. It's time. The more you buy, the more time you spend with the records, you'll start to understand what was released when, if it was released in America only or in Europe only, and so on and so forth. So that's a dead giveaway. UPC code is going to tell you how early that pressing is. Label colors are going to tell you how, as the labels change, if it's an original or not. And also, you want to look at catalog numbers and matrix numbers. And those, you can nerd out on any of this. I'm sure you're going to go and run to Discogs to check out to see if your record matches up. Easy way to tell right here. Your catalog number, it's also listed on the spine. Sometimes when you see an original like this, it'll just have the straight up catalog number. Sometimes you look, I don't have a copy here, but I'll try to put a picture up on the screen if I remember to do so. And this is where I first noticed this started happening when I was a lot younger with some of my Bowie records. You would see down here it said previously released as. If you see that with a different number, it's not a first pressing. And sometimes when they do represses, there'll be a small little sticker here with a different catalog number. If you see a sticker over your record like that covering the original, it's a repress. It's not an original pressing. But you can go check your catalog number and your matrix number against Discogs or whatever database record nerd thing you use to see if it's a first pressing or at least within the first run. The matrix number here, you'll also find other weird stuff if I can get a good view of that. Here in the dead wax, this is what we call the dead wax. Usually your catalog number that you see on your record here, right there for instance, that light is shining right there. It'll be carved in the matrix here, in the dead wax, sorry, with the matrix number. You might see a couple other little letters or numbers which denote the pressing plants, and so on and so forth. And sometimes you'll even find secret messages in there. A lot of people have weird theories about that, like crazy things that are carved or pressed into your record here, usually scratched in by hand. Those actually were done by the guys who were pressing the records, the engineers or so forth, who just wanted to make notes and their own little inside jokes or little signals for themselves so that they know what plate they were using when they pressed it, or so on and so forth. There's really no mystical crazy thing, but it is kind of fun to see if there's any secret hidden messages there in your dead wax. Okay, another point people often ask, what is a promo? A promo is a record usually given to radio stations or the press to write about, like your music critics, TVs, radios, whatever. Or, well, I just mentioned radio, didn't I? For them to play to help promote this new release or this new artist. A lot of times it's a dead giveaway if you have a promo. Look at this ZZ Top record right here. Obviously, look at that. It's got a promo stamp right there. Sometimes you get a promo stamp, you turn it over on the back, and you'll see a gold promo stamp here. And some people ask, what is a white label promo? I will show you that in 1 second. Like this ZZ Top, just a regular straight up promo. Pull it out of its package, if I can get that to come out. It's a straight up, you can't tell by the label that it's a promo. It's just a straight up Warner Brothers label. By the way, remember we were looking at Alice Cooper? This is what later Warner Brothers looks like. They changed from completely green to, look at this, plain. Let me get you a white label promo and I'll show you so you can see what I'm talking about. I'll put a picture here. Let me just put a picture here so you can see what I'm talking about. I had a Dylan record here in the store and I can't find it now. Someone must have bought it. It was a great example of a white label promo. But anyway, take a look. There you see. Again, it's just a collector thing. If you're into it, it's great. It's got a white label, whereas other labels have colors. And it just says demonstration or for promotional use only, blah, 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 blah. Some people ask, what is a cutout? What's the difference between a cutout and a promo? Sometimes it's hard to tell because there's just like a little saw mark in the album cover that you have. Or sometimes the end is cut off. Basically, a cutout was a normal record that the record company put out that didn't sell well. And you used to be able to return albums that you didn't sell to get credit towards your next purchase when you're buying stock. So what they did was take some of these records that weren't big sellers and snip the corner off. And that was a way to tell, once they shipped those out to the retailer, like those have already been discounted, you can't get credit for those again. You're stuck with that when you order it. That's basically what that is. So that they wouldn't be able to get credit for that record twice because it was a slow seller. But sometimes you'll see a hole drilled in the corner here or a little cut, and that can also denote that it's a promo, not necessarily a cutout. Usually, like I said, the cutout is... Sometimes it's hard to tell, though. Imports, how do I know if it's an import? You know, this is a weird thing. Imports can be tricky. Let's put it... How do we say this? Knowing, again, what records came out when, and if that artist put that out in the States or not, that's going to be a big indicator. But also, when you look at the back of some of your records, and I don't happen to have an example here, on the U.S. pressings, let me see. 1 second. How can you tell if my record is an import, like I was saying? You just know, kind of. Sometimes it can be a dead giveaway because of the cover. If you're aware that this record was released as a gatefold in the United States, but not in England, it's a dead giveaway. It could be the other way around, whatever. When I was younger, especially during the 80s, how I was able to tell, and you can still tell, is anything from the 80s moving onwards, well, especially in the 80s, they've tried to trick us again in these, at this point in time when they started reissuing records. It's kind of just a standard issue. No big deal. And as a matter of fact, most records are either pressed, yes, strictly in the US or in Europe these days. Most actually are printed overseas because the U.S. during the 90s and 2000s shut down a lot of their pressing plants. So when you buy new records, you'll see like there'll be a sticker on it that says made in the Czech Republic, made in Germany, made in whatever. They'll all have the same barcode, they'll all have whatever. So that's really the only way you know. Sometimes when you look at the address on the bottom of a record, you'll see printed in Britain or in Germany, and that's another indicator. But let's talk about the classic era in the 70s, especially 80s stuff. How can I tell if I have an import? Well, when we look at this Loverboy record, the US pressings always are pretty standard with this, with their UPC code here, the barcode. However, I don't have an import of this Loverboy record, but what I do have is this UB40 record here, which is an import. And when you compare, usually on the US ones, you have your barcode here in the corner. The European ones a lot of times have this. They'll have like a little emblem for a record and a little emblem for a cassette. Remember that? They used to sell a lot of those back then. Sometimes, I'll try to put a screenshot up here, they'll have a little pill looking thing, like a little capsule looking thing with a code like LC 461 or something. Those are usually a dead giveaway. If you're looking at the same title, the same record cover, and you're like, which one's American, which one's European pressing or whatever, dead giveaway right there. When you see the regular UPC code, it's pretty standard for United States. And then when you see little codes like this, usually English, German, somewhere in Europe, those pressings. Here in Mexico, it's easy to tell. You can spot them a mile away if it's a Mexican copy or an American copy or a European copy, because the Mexican copies are crap. They're printed on crap sleeves. The catalog number right on the front is a dead giveaway. A super dead giveaway is if you see titles in Japanese or Spanish, dang, dude, that right there, your Loverboy album is definitely an import if you have it listed in Japanese or in Spanish. And if you're really nerding out and you want to know about singles, these are albums. If you're looking at 12-inch singles and you want to know, is this an import single or is this a domestic single? Again, guys, I hate to keep repeating myself. A lot is just knowing, was that released? Let's talk about the Cult real quick. They didn't release that many singles in the US back in the 80s, but they released several in England. So if you have a 12-inch of Rain or Sanctuary or whatever, you know, it's a good chance. Revolution, those are imports. However, they did release like Sanctuary in the UK, in Europe, as well as the US once they caught on. But one way is to look at the sleeve. A lot of the European sleeves are really thin and they usually open at the top, whereas the American sleeves for singles always on the side, just like an album, and they're usually pressed in thicker cardboard. And again, you'll have a big catalog number on it, usually your UPC on the back, whereas the British 12 inches and the German 12 inches and Dutch ones didn't have that. They're usually, the European sleeves are usually really shiny where the American ones aren't. Again, these are just, you know, it's a measuring stick for what you are to go by. They're not always the same. There are differences. Some look exactly the same. It's just spending time with your records is going to be your biggest help and your biggest way to learn of what came out when. Is it original? Is it import? Is it promo? Is it not? But again, just to recap everything, look for those UPC codes. You'll start to learn your labels. Label color is a big indicator. Also, just knowing, like I keep saying, whether or not that record was released here in the US or in England or wherever, that's going to be a dead giveaway. Spend time with your records, with your collection, and you'll learn. Whether you like it or not, you will learn, and you'll be able to tell when you're out shopping, when someone's trying to trade you a record or you want to buy, you'll be able to say, oh, that's a green Warner Brothers. That's an early pressing. I want to get that. You'll learn. Keep at it. I hope that helps in you being able to tell whether or not you have an import, first pressing, promo, or not. Let me know what you think. Get in touch if you have any questions. Thanks again for watching. Keep on rocking.